The wind does not blow across the island of Spitsbergen so much as it leans against it, a heavy, invisible weight that has existed for 10,000 years. It is a slow, rhythmic pressure, pressing the indigo shadows into the crevices of the frozen rock. Here, at the edge of the world, the air is not merely cold. It is an ancient presence, a dry and breathless thing that carries the scent of stone and deep, prehistoric ice. The guard stands at the foot of the mountain, Platyburget, and feels the wind moving through the thick, dark wool of his heavy coat. The fabric is rough, a charcoal gray that seems to absorb what little light remains in the polar night. In the soft, grainy texture of the world, like a drawing made with heavy pastels on a sheet of black paper, the guard is a silhouette of stillness. He is a vertical line in a land of horizontal drifts. His breath emerges from behind the thick weave of his scarf in a slow, gray plume. It does not dissipate quickly. It lingers in the frozen air, a soft cloud of moisture that crystals instantly, falling like microscopic dust onto the front of his parka. The sound of his breathing is the only clock he has. It is a wet, muffled thud in his own ears, keeping time with the slow, distant pulse of the sea ice grinding against the shore miles below. He does not move. To move is to invite the friction of frozen fabric against frozen skin, a sound that would break the perfect, heavy silence of the mountain. He waits. The duty is not one of action, but of endurance. He is the witness to the stillness. He is the guardian of the quiet. The mountain itself is a monument of sandstone and siltstone, layers upon layers of history pressed into a singular, unyielding mass. It is a dark blue shape against a sky that is only a slightly paler shade of midnight. In the guard's mind, he can see the layers of the earth beneath his boots. He thinks of the permafrost, the ground that has not known the warmth of a true thaw in millennia. It is a deep, subterranean anchor, keeping the world from shifting. The permafrost is the reason they are here. It is the reason the seeds are safe. He feels the cold rising through the thick soles of his boots, a slow, creeping numbness that reminds him of the gravity of his post. The cold is not an enemy, it is the preservative. It is the very thing that ensures the future remains frozen, tucked away in the belly of the rock. To his left, the entrance to the vault protrudes from the mountainside like a shard of gray glass. It is a concrete wedge, a brutalist spike that defies the softness of the surrounding snow. In the dim, ambient glow of the polar night, the concrete looks like textured lead. There are no bright lights here. There is only a single, low-wattage lamp above the heavy steel door, casting a faint, amber circle onto the rime-covered ground. The light is weak, struggling against the encroaching blue. It catches the edges of the ice crystals that have formed on the door's hinges, feathery, delicate structures that look like lace made of salt. The guard watches the light. It flickers almost imperceptibly, a tiny heartbeat in the vast, frozen dark. He begins his patrol. Each step is a deliberate, heavy movement. The snow beneath his boots does not crunch, it moans. It is too cold for the sharp, bright sound of fresh powder. Instead, the snow is packed, ancient and dry, yielding to his weight with a low, dull groan that vibrates up through his shins. He moves with the gait of a man underwater, a slow-motion transit through an atmosphere that has become thick with frost. He follows the perimeter of the entrance, his eyes tracing the line where the man-made concrete meets the natural stone. In the soft pencil shadows of the mountain, the seam is nearly invisible. It is a marriage of the industrial and the geological, a quiet pact made to survive the end of the world. The guard thinks of the history of this place, of the miners who first came to Longyearbyen in the early 20th century. He thinks of the coal, the black veins of ancient forests buried deep within these same mountains. For decades, men pulled heat from the dark, burning the past to survive the Arctic present. But now, the mountain serves a different purpose. It no longer gives up its riches, it holds them. It has become a vessel. The guard feels the weight of this transition. He is not a miner. He is a curator of silence. He is here to ensure that the silence is never interrupted by the warmth of change. He passes his gloved hand over the rough surface of the exterior wall. The texture is like sandpaper, cold and biting even through the thick leather. The wind shifts. It carries with it a new sound, a low metallic hum that seems to emanate from the very heart of the peak. It is the sound of the cooling system, the mechanical lungs of the vault. It is a monotone vibration, a steady nnnnhhhhh that matches the pitch of the wind. The guard stops to listen. He knows this sound intimately. It is the sound of the seeds staying at a constant minus 18 degrees Celsius. It is the sound of life held in a state of suspended animation. He imagines the millions of seeds inside, each one a tiny, dried potential, wrapped in foil envelopes, tucked into plastic crates, stacked on metal shelves. They are sleeping in the dark, and he is the one who stands outside their bedroom door. He looks up at the sky. There are no stars tonight. The clouds are a thick charcoal blanket that reflects nothing. The world is a study in gradients of gray and blue. He remembers a drawing he once saw, a sketch made with soft pastels on a dark blue board. The artist had used a white pencil to highlight the ridges of the snow, creating a sense of depth that felt more real than the landscape itself. That is how the mountain looks now. The ridges are faint, hazy lines of pale gray, disappearing into the blackness of the summit. There is no horizon. There is only the slope and the void. The guard's eyelashes are heavy now. Moisture from his eyes has frozen into tiny beads of ice, weighing down his lids. He blinks slowly, the ice clicking softly against his skin. It is a small, intimate sound, the only thing he can hear besides the wind and the hum. He feels the weight of his duty like a physical burden, a heavy pack strapped to his soul. It is not a burden of fear, but of boredom, a deep, holy boredom that requires a specific kind of strength. To stand here, hour after hour, while the world sleeps, requires a mind that can become as still as the permafrost. He must become part of the mountain. He must let the cold settle into his bones until he no longer feels the need to shiver. He reaches the edge of the plateau and looks out toward the Isfjorden. The water is a black inkwell, indistinguishable from the sky except for the way it swallows the faint, distant lights of the town. Longyearbyen is a cluster of amber sparks miles away, looking fragile and temporary against the vast, Arctic indifference. The guard feels a brief, flickering sense of connection to those lights, but it fades as quickly as a falling star. His world is here, in the shadow of the vault. His world is the door, the ice, and the hum. He turns back toward the entrance. The amber light of the lamp seems even dimmer now, a pale, sickly glow that barely reaches the snow. He imagines the light as a dying ember, the last bit of warmth in a universe that is slowly turning to stone. He walks toward it, his boots making that same low, rhythmic groan. Step, pause, breath, step, pause, breath. The rhythm is hypnotic. It lulls the mind into a state of gray neutrality. He is no longer Elias, he is the guard. He is the human component of a geological process. He stops in front of the door again. He checks the seal. He looks for any sign of moisture, any hint that the warmth of the interior is escaping, or that the cold of the exterior is being compromised. There is nothing. The ice lace on the hinges has not changed. The frost patterns on the concrete remain static. Everything is as it should be. Everything is frozen. He leans his back against the cold wall, feeling the vibration of the cooling system through his spine. It is a comforting sensation, a reminder that the machine is still breathing, even if the world is not. The wind picks up, carrying a fine spray of ice crystals that sting the small patch of exposed skin around his eyes. He does not flinch. He simply narrows his gaze, looking out into the blue-black haze. The ice crystals are like tiny diamonds, catching the amber light for a fraction of a second before vanishing into the dark. They are beautiful in a harsh, uncaring way. They are the dust of the Arctic, the ground-down remains of glaciers and mountains. He thinks about the seeds again. The wild emmer wheat from the Fertile Crescent, the rice from the valleys of Asia, the maize from the highlands of Mexico. They are all here, gathered in this cold, dark room, separated from their ancestral homes by thousands of miles and 100 degrees of temperature. They are the survivors of a world that is always changing, always burning, always thirsting. And here in the heart of the permafrost, they have found the only thing that can save them, the absolute absence of change. The guard shifts his weight. His knees ache with a dull, heavy throb, a reminder of the hours he has spent standing on the frozen ground. He welcomes the ache. It is a sign of life, a small fire burning in the center of his joints. He focuses on the pain, letting it fill his consciousness until the wind and the cold are just a background hum. He is a sentinel of the seeds. He is the keeper of the doomsday room, and the night is only just beginning. The sky begins to shift, not into light, but into a deeper, more resonant shade of violet. It is a subtle change, one that only someone who has spent hours in the dark would notice. The charcoal clouds are thinning, revealing the immense empty space above. There is a sense of scale here that is terrifying and beautiful. The guard feels small, a tiny speck of carbon on a ball of ice spinning through a silent vacuum. But he is a speck with a purpose. He is the one who stays awake, so that the future can sleep. He takes a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs like liquid lead. It is heavy and satisfying. He lets it out slowly, watching the plume of frost drift away into the violet dark. He is ready for the next hour. He is ready for the next century. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. He continues his patrol, a slow, dark shape moving through a world of blue shadows and soft pencil light, his footsteps a rhythmic prayer to the endurance of the earth. The silence of the mountain is not an empty thing. It is full of the history of the stone, the slow grinding of tectonic plates, and the weight of the ice sheets that once covered this land miles deep. The guard listens to the silence. He hears the ghosts of the old explorers, the men who came here in wooden ships and slept in furs, dreaming of the North Pole. He hears the echo of the coal picks in the abandoned shafts below. But mostly, he hears the stillness. It is a thick, velvet curtain that muffles everything, turning the world into a soft focus drawing. He looks at his hands, encased in thick, reinforced gloves. They look like the hands of a statue, frozen in a gesture of eternal patience. He moves his fingers slowly, feeling the stiffness of the leather. Everything here moves slowly. The ice grows slowly. The mountain erodes slowly. The seeds age slowly. It is a place where time has been stretched thin, like a piece of wire pulled until it is almost invisible. The guard is part of that stretching. He is a minute hand that only moves once a day. He reaches the heavy steel door again. He places his hand on the handle not to open it but to feel the cold metal. It is so cold it feels hot, a searing, dry sensation that penetrates the layers of his glove. This is the barrier. On one side, the harsh, unpredictable world of wind and ice. On the other side, the perfect, curated world of the vault. He stands at the threshold, the bridge between the two. He is the lock and the key. The amber light flickers again, casting a long, wavering shadow of the guard against the concrete wall. The shadow is tall and distorted, reaching up toward the dark ceiling of the sky. It looks like a giant, a protector from an old myth, standing guard over the treasures of the earth. The guard watches his shadow, amused by the thought. In this light, in this place, anything is possible. The line between reality and the soft pastel dream of the Arctic is very, very thin. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the darkness inside his lids merge with the darkness of the mountain. He can still feel the wind. He can still hear the hum. He is still there. He is always there. The heavy, dark wool of the guard's coat seems to grow heavier as the hour moves toward its unseen center. It is a slow, accumulating weight, the kind that does not press down all at once, but rather settles like silt at the bottom of a cold lake. He can feel the individual fibers of the wool, coarsened by the salt in the air and the constant, abrasive touch of the wind. In the dim, amber glow of the lantern he carries, the fabric takes on the texture of a landscape itself, valleys of shadow between the ridges of the weave, silvered here and there by the fine dust of the Arctic. It is a vintage garment, heavy and thick, designed for a time when survival was measured in the density of one's layers. He shifts his shoulders, and the sound of the wool rubbing against itself is a low, dry friction, like the sound of a pencil moving across a rough sheet of charcoal paper. The lantern is an old-fashioned thing, its glass frosted with a delicate pattern of ice that the flame inside has not yet managed to melt. The light it casts is not sharp. It is a soft, blurry smudge of gold against the bruising indigo of the night. It illuminates only a few feet of the ground in front of him, turning the snow into a grainy, textured surface of pale blues and deep grays. Every pebble of frozen silt, every jagged edge of the mountain's base, is given a long, wavering shadow that dances in rhythm with the guard's slow, deliberate stride. He watches these shadows. They are his only companions in the deep, blue-gray silence of the Svalbard winter. They stretch and contract, reaching out toward the dark entrance of the vault like spectral fingers, only to retreat when the lantern moves away. He thinks of the treaty that made this place possible. It was the year 1920, a time of ink and parchment, when men in far-off rooms in Paris sat under high ceilings and signed the Svalbard Treaty. It was a slow, quiet piece of history, a gathering of signatures that decreed this frozen archipelago a place of peace, a place where no nation could build a fortress of war. The guard finds a strange, cold comfort in this thought. The ground beneath his feet is neutral ground. It is a land that belongs to everyone and to no one, a sanctuary carved out of the ice by the stroke of a pen. The history of this place is not one of battles or conquests, but of a long, sustained agreement to leave the mountain in peace. It is a boring history, a history of administrative patience and geological time, and it suits the guard perfectly. He reaches the edge of the small plateau where the concrete portal of the vault emerges from the rock. Here, the wind is channeled by the shape of the mountain, creating a low, mournful whistle as it passes over the sharp edges of the structure. It is a hollow sound, the sound of air moving through an empty flute. He pauses to listen to it, his head tilted slightly to the side. There is a rhythm to the wind's lament, a slow rise and fall that matches the beating of his own heart. He closes his eyes and imagines the mountain as a giant, sleeping animal, its breath moving through the stone in a long, prehistoric sigh. The concrete of the vault is like a tooth in the mountain's jaw, cold and unyielding, protecting the treasure within. Inside that tooth, beyond the heavy steel doors and the long, descending tunnel, are the seeds. They are the true inhabitants of this mountain. The guard thinks of them often, the millions of tiny lives held in a state of suspended animation. He thinks of the barley from the high plateaus of Ethiopia, the wheat from the dusty plains of the American Midwest, and the rice from the terraced hills of Vietnam. Each seed is a tiny, dried miracle, a concentrated history of the Earth's soil and sun. They are wrapped in 3-ply foil, tucked into plastic crates, and stacked on shelves that will never see the light of day. They are the passengers of a stone ship, sailing through the sea of time toward a destination that no one can name. The guard's boots make a dull, rhythmic sound as he turns to walk back toward the entrance. Thud, thud, thud. The snow is so cold that it has lost its crystalline structure, becoming more like a fine, heavy sand. It does not fly into the air when he walks, it simply displaces, settling into the shape of his footprints with a quiet, settling hiss. He looks back at his trail. In the soft pastel light of the polar night, the footprints look like deep, dark bruises on the skin of the mountain. They are the only sign that anything has moved here in hours. The mountain itself is motionless, a dark, heavy mass that seems to absorb all sound and all light. He focuses on the sensation of his breath inside the scarf. It is a warm, humid microclimate, a small pocket of life in a world of ice. The moisture from his breath has begun to freeze on the outer layers of the fabric, creating a stiff, icy mask that cracks slightly every time he moves his jaw. He can feel the cold air trying to find a way in, a sharp, thin needle of frost that pricks at his nostrils. He breathes slowly, shallowly, letting the air warm in his throat before it reaches his lungs. To breathe too deeply here is to invite the mountain inside, and the mountain is too cold for any living thing. To his right, the mountain face rises up, a wall of dark siltstone that disappears into the charcoal sky. In the drawing of this world, the mountain would be rendered with heavy, vertical strokes of a dark blue pencil, layered over with a thin wash of gray. There are no sharp lines here, only gradients of shadow. The guard's lantern catches a vein of quartz in the rock, a sudden, brilliant spark of white that looks like a star fallen into the stone. He stops to look at it. It is a small, quiet beauty, a moment of clarity in the hazy, blue darkness. He reaches out a gloved hand and touches the cold stone. The texture is rough and ancient, a surface that has been polished by the wind for thousands of years. The hum of the cooling system remains constant, a low-frequency vibration that he can feel in the soles of his boots. It is the sound of the vault's heart, a mechanical pulse that never falters. The cooling system is there to ensure that even if the world warms, the seeds will stay at their required temperature of -18 degrees. It is a backup for the permafrost, a human insurance policy against the shifting of the seasons. The guard listens to the hum, finding a strange solace in its monotony. It is a sound that signifies that everything is going according to plan. There are no alarms, no sudden shifts in pitch, no interruptions. There is only the steady, unceasing work of the machines. He thinks about the engineers who designed this place, the men and women who calculated the exact depth of the tunnel and the thickness of the concrete. They worked with numbers and blueprints, translating the language of physics into a fortress of stone. Their history is one of measurements and technical specifications, a boring and meticulous process that produced something transcendent. The guard feels a kinship with them. He is the one who maintains the integrity of their calculations. He is the human element in their equation of survival. The sky above him is a deep, resonant violet, the color of an old bruise. There is no moon tonight, but the stars are starting to poke through the thinning clouds. They are not the bright, twinkling stars of the south. They are cold, hard points of light, distant and uncaring. They look like pinpricks in a dark velvet curtain, revealing the immense, freezing void that lies beyond the atmosphere. The guard looks up, his neck stiff from the weight of his hood. The scale of the universe is too large to comprehend, so he brings his gaze back down to the small, amber circle of his lantern. It is better to focus on the immediate, the reachable, the small. He walks toward the portal again, his movements slow and rhythmic. Each step is a meditation on the nature of endurance. To endure is not to fight the cold, but to accept it. To endure is to become a part of the stillness. He thinks of the polar bears that roam the island, great white ghosts that move with a surprising, heavy grace across the ice. They are the masters of this land, their bodies built for the cold, their lives a long, slow cycle of hunting and sleeping. He has not seen a bear tonight, but he knows they are out there, somewhere in the dark, their breath clouds mingling with the wind. He is not afraid of them. They are simply another part of the mountain's history, another layer in the drawing of the Arctic. The light of the lantern flickers, the flame dancing behind the frosted glass. He adjusts the wick, a small mechanical task that requires him to remove one of his outer gloves. The air hits his hand like a physical blow, a sudden searing cold that makes his skin tingle. He works quickly, his fingers stiff and clumsy, and then pulls the glove back on. The warmth returns slowly, a dull, throbbing sensation that reminds him of the fragile boundary between himself and the environment. He is a creature of warmth, standing in a place of absolute cold. He is a spark of fire in a world of shadow. He reaches the heavy steel door of the vault. It is a massive thing, built to withstand the pressure of the mountain and the passage of centuries. He places his hand on the cold surface, feeling the subtle vibration of the machinery within. He imagines the tunnel behind the door, a long, sloping corridor lined with concrete, leading down into the heart of the rock. It is a quiet place, a place where the air is still and the light is dim. It is a place where time has been slowed to a crawl. The seeds do not know that the wind is blowing outside. They do not know that the guard is standing there in the dark. They only know the cold, a deep, restorative sleep that will last as long as the mountain stands. He looks out over the Isfjorden again. The black water is dotted with small, floating chunks of ice, looking like white scales on the back of a great, dark fish. The lights of Longyearbyen are still there, a faint, amber glow on the horizon. He thinks of the people in the town, sleeping in their warm beds, their dreams full of the colors of the world below. They are living in a different time, a time of hours and minutes, while he is living in the time of the mountain. He is the guardian of their future, the one who watches over the blueprints of their fields and gardens. The wind shifts again, blowing a fine spray of snow against his face. He closes his eyes and lets the ice crystals settle on his skin. They are tiny, sharp points of sensation, a reminder that he is still awake, still present. He is the witness to the night. He is the sentinel of the seeds, and the mountain remains steady, a dark, heavy mass in a world of blue shadows and soft, pastel light. The silence is absolute. The cold is eternal. He continues his patrol, a slow, dark shape moving through the deep, gray history of the Arctic. The lantern in the guard's hand is a heavy, cast-iron vessel that feels like a natural extension of his arm. It is a solid, grounding weight, swinging with a slow, hypnotic momentum that dictates the pace of his steps. In the dark, colored pencil world of the mountain, the light from the lantern is a soft, blurry circle of ochre, its edges bleeding into the deep indigo shadows of the frozen ground. The glass of the lantern is thick and wavy, distorting the flame within so that it appears as a shifting, amber ghost. This light does not pierce the darkness. It merely pushes it back a few inches, revealing the rough, grainy texture of the permafrost. On a dark surface, a white pastel would be used here to catch the tops of the frozen ridges, creating a shimmering, silvered effect that looks like pulverized diamonds scattered across the charcoal earth. The guard watches this play of light and shadow, his eyes following the way the amber glow catches the edges of the rime frost. Everything is textured, everything is layered, and everything is perfectly, agonizingly still. He stops at the point where the man-made tunnel begins its descent into the rock. The history of this excavation is a history of cold endurance, a story of drills and dynamite fighting against the stubborn, frozen will of the mountain. It was the year 2008 when the heavy doors were first hung, but the mountain had been preparing for this moment for millions of years. The guard thinks of the construction workers, their faces red and raw from the wind, their breath rising in thick, white plumes as they hollowed out the stone. They were not building a monument for their own time. They were building a vault for a time they would never see. The engineering of the vault is a boring, meticulous science of thermal equilibrium and geological stability. It is a story of reinforced concrete, of 300 meters of solid rock, and of a cooling system designed to run without human intervention. The guard is the only human part of this machine now, a solitary figure standing at the mouth of a mechanical cave. He feels the cold creeping through the layers of his gloves, a slow, biting sensation that has long since passed from pain into a dull, vibrating ache. He flexes his fingers, the movement restricted by the thickness of the leather and the stiffness of his own joints. The sound of the leather creaking is like the sound of an old wooden ship at sea, a low, rhythmic groan that anchors him to the physical world. He looks at his boots, covered in a fine layer of frost that has turned the dark leather into a pale, chalky gray. The boots are heavy, with thick rubber soles that dampen the sound of his footsteps, turning the walk into a silent, spectral transit. He is a shadow moving through shadows, a ghost of a man guarding a treasure of dried life. The silence here is not empty. It is a dense, physical presence. It is the silence of a tomb, but one where the inhabitants are not dead, only waiting. He thinks of the specific seeds tucked away in the belly of the mountain, the forgotten varieties of emmer and einkorn, the ancient maize from the high Andes, the drought-resistant sorghums from the edges of the Sahara. They are all here, stripped of their stories and their soil, reduced to their biological blueprints. They are the survivors of history, and the guard is their witness. He imagines the crates inside, stacked like cordwood on the metal shelves. They are gray, standardized, and unremarkable, much like the mountain itself. There is no grandeur in the storage of the seeds, only the heavy, administrative necessity of their preservation. He turns his gaze toward the sky once more. The clouds have parted slightly, revealing a sliver of the deep celestial void. The stars are hard and bright, like chips of ice embedded in a sheet of black glass. There is no warmth in their light, only the cold, distant reminder of the vastness of the universe. The guard feels the weight of the mountain above him and the weight of the stars above the mountain. He is caught between two infinities, a small, breathing speck of warmth in an ocean of absolute zero. He thinks of the drawings of the Arctic, how they often fail to capture the sheer, crushing scale of the landscape. In his mind, he sees the drawing he is a part of, the heavy, dark blue strokes of the sky, the charcoal smudge of the mountain, and the single, tiny spark of amber from his lantern. It is a composition of solitude. He begins to walk again, following the perimeter of the plateau. The wind has dropped to a low, rhythmic sigh, a sound that is more felt than heard. It vibrates through the fabric of his coat and the bones of his face. He feels the skin of his cheeks tightening, the moisture in his pores turning to microscopic crystals. He does not rub his face. He knows that the cold is a surface he must live with. He focuses on the rhythm of his breathing, the slow in and out that keeps his internal fire burning. Each breath is a small victory, a quiet assertion of life in a world that is fundamentally indifferent to it. The history of the Svalbard Seed Vault is a history of the worst-case scenario. It is a structure built for a world that has lost its way, a safety net for a planet that is slowly tilting out of balance. The guard finds a strange, hypnotic comfort in this. To be prepared for the end of the world is to be free from the anxieties of the everyday. Here, in the polar night, the small dramas of human life are erased. There are no politics here, no economies, no fleeting fashions of thought. There is only the mountain, the seeds, and the cold. It is a simplified existence, a return to the basic elements of stone and ice. He is the guardian of the baseline, the one who ensures that no matter what happens in the sunlit world below, the mountain will remain at -18 degrees. He passes a small, metallic vent protruding from the rock, a dark shape that would be missed by anyone not looking for it. A faint, rhythmic clicking comes from within, the sound of a relay or a sensor, a tiny mechanical heartbeat. He stops to listen to it, his head bowed. The sound is delicate, a sharp, metallic tink-tink-tink that contrasts with the low moan of the wind. It is a reminder that the vault is alive in its own way, a complex system of circuits and wires that are constantly monitoring the darkness. The guard feels a sense of duty toward these machines. They are his partners in this vigil, the silent workers who never tire and never feel the cold. He thinks about the permafrost, the ground that stays frozen all year round. It is the foundation of the vault, a natural refrigerator that would keep the seeds safe even if the power failed. The history of the permafrost is the history of the Earth's climate, a frozen record of thousands of years of cold. The guard feels the permafrost through the soles of his boots, a hard, unyielding stability that gives him a sense of permanence. In a world that is always changing, the frozen ground is a constant. It is the anchor of the mountain, the thing that keeps the vault from being swallowed by the sea or the shifting stone. His lantern flickers, the flame dipping as a small draft finds its way through the vents. He shields the glass with his heavy, gloved hand, the leather casting a large, distorted shadow onto the snow. The warmth of the glass is faint, a mere memory of heat, but he presses his fingers against it for a moment, seeking the small comfort of the flame. The light glows through the weave of his glove, a dull, reddish orange that looks like an ember in the dark. In the visual style of this story, this would be a moment of chiaroscuro, the intense, warm light of the fire fighting against the overwhelming blue of the surroundings. It is a small, quiet rebellion against the night. He continues his patrol, his footsteps making that low, rhythmic groan in the packed snow. Step, pause, step, pause. He is not in a hurry. There is nowhere to go and no one to meet. His life has become a series of slow, deliberate movements, a long-form meditation on the nature of duty. He thinks of the explorers who first mapped these islands, men like Barents and Nordenskjöld, who came here in wooden ships and saw the same blue shadows and the same white peaks. Their history is his history, a legacy of quiet suffering and silent endurance. They were the first to understand the weight of the Arctic, the way it strips a man down to his core and leaves him with nothing but his own breath and the stone. The mountain face to his right is a wall of dark siltstone, layered like the pages of a very old, very dusty book. The guard imagines he can read the history of the earth in these layers, the periods of warmth, the periods of ice, the slow accumulation of sediment at the bottom of ancient seas. The vault is just the newest layer, a thin skin of concrete and steel added to the top of a geological epic. He is a character in the final chapter, the one who stands watch while the book is closed for the winter. He reaches the edge of the plateau again, looking out over the dark expanse of the Isfjorden. The water is a deep, obsidian black, reflecting nothing but the void of the sky. Somewhere out there, the sea ice is forming, a slow, crystalline expansion that will eventually lock the island in a white embrace. He can hear the distant, low-frequency rumble of the ice sheets shifting, a sound that is more of a vibration in the gut than a noise in the ear. It is the sound of the world's gears turning, the slow, heavy machinery of the seasons. The guard feels a sense of peace in this cold, dark world. He is no longer troubled by the noise of the world below. Here, everything is clear. Everything is defined by the cold and the dark. He is the guard, and he is protecting the Doomsday room. It is a simple, heavy purpose that requires nothing but his presence. He takes a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs like a draft of icy water. He is ready for the next hour. He is ready for the next year. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. He turns his back to the sea and begins the long, slow walk back toward the amber light of the vault's entrance, a dark figure moving through a landscape of soft pencil shadows and ancient, blue-gray silence. The light of his lantern catches a drift of snow that has built up against a jagged rock. The snow is textured with small, wind-blown ripples, looking like a miniature mountain range of its own. In the pastel drawing of this scene, the artist would use a light touch of blue-gray to define the shadows in the ripples, creating a sense of immense, quiet depth. The guard pauses to look at it, marveling at the way the wind has sculpted the frozen dust. Even in this land of absolute stillness, there is a slow, hidden movement. Nothing is truly static, not even the ice. He moves closer to the vault's concrete portal, the brutalist spike of gray standing out against the soft curves of the snow. The amber light above the door is a beacon of sorts, though its light is too weak to reach the horizon. It is a beacon for him alone, a reminder of the threshold he guards. He checks the exterior sensors, his eyes scanning the small, metallic housings for any sign of damage or frost buildup. Everything is in order. The machines are doing their work, and he is doing his. As he stands there, the wind picks up a single low-pitched note, a vibration that seems to come from the very core of the mountain. It is a sound of immense weight and age, a sound that has no name in the languages of men. The guard closes his eyes and listens. He feels the mountain beneath his feet, the miles of stone reaching down into the earth's mantle. He is part of it now. He is a layer of the rock, a crystalline structure of duty and endurance. The night continues its slow, violet rotation, and he remains at his post, a silent sentinel in the heart of the polar dark. The weight of the darkness at 78 degrees north is not merely an absence of light, but a physical substance, a heavy, velvet curtain that seems to press against the guard's chest as he moves. It is a thick, indigo pressure, the color of a deep-sea trench, rendered in the mind like a heavy application of soft, dark blue pastel on a coarse, black paper. The guard feels this weight in his lungs with every inhalation. Each breath is a slow, methodical process, a deliberate intake of air so cold it feels brittle, as if he were inhaling crushed glass that had been smoothed by the tides of an ancient, frozen ocean. The air travels through the layers of his wool scarf, picking up the faint, dusty scent of the fabric, a scent of old sheep's wool, and the metallic tang of the Arctic frost. It is a scent that has not changed in 100 years. It is a scent of endurance. He shifts his weight from his left foot to his right, and the movement is a slow, tectonic shift in the landscape of his own body. He can feel the individual layers of his clothing working in silent, friction-heavy concert. First, the thin layer of silk against his skin, designed to wick away the smallest hint of moisture before it can freeze. Then, the heavy, ribbed wool of his thermal undershirt, its texture rough and reassuring. Over that, a thick sweater knitted from the oily, water-resistant wool of Icelandic sheep, a garment that holds the heat of his body in a series of tiny, trapped pockets of air. Finally, the heavy, charcoal-gray parka, its outer shell a rugged canvas that has been waxed to a dull, matte finish. In the dim, amber light of his lantern, the wax on the parka catches the glow, looking like the skin of some ancient deep-sea creature. The guard is a walking fortress of insulation, a microclimate of 37 degrees Celsius floating in a world of -20. He looks down at the ground, where the amber light of his lantern creates a soft, blurry circle of gold on the textured snow. The snow here is not soft. It is a crust of frozen salt and ice, sculpted by the wind into miniature dunes and ridges. In the vintage drawing of this scene, these ridges would be highlighted with a sharp, white-colored pencil, creating a sense of crystalline hardness. The guard watches a single, rogue crystal of ice as it skitters across the surface of the crust, driven by a sudden, low-pitched gust of wind. The crystal moves with a dry, rattling sound, a tiny, percussive note in the grand, orchestral moan of the mountain. He follows its path until it vanishes into the shadows beyond the lantern's reach. Everything here is in motion, yet everything is still. It is a paradox of the Arctic, a place where the wind moves mountains of snow, but the landscape remains eternally the same. The history of this island, Spitsbergen, is a history of slow, frozen layers. Long before the seeds arrived, long before the vault was a blueprint in a laboratory in Oslo, there was the coal. The guard thinks of John Munro Longyear, the American who came here in the early 1900s and saw not a wasteland of ice, but a treasure chest of carbon. The history of the Arctic is often told through the lens of exploration, but the guard prefers the boring history of the industry, the slow, methodical extraction of coal from the dark seams of the mountain. He thinks of the wooden tramways that once crisscrossed these slopes, the heavy buckets of black stone moving silently through the polar night. The coal was the energy of the past, the remains of ancient forests that once grew in this very spot when the world was green and humid. Now, the mountain holds the seeds, the potential for a green future, buried in the same stone that holds the black remains of the prehistoric past. It is a cycle of carbon and life, a slow, geological breathing that the guard is privileged to witness. He walks toward one of the large, circular ventilation pipes that protrude from the mountainside like the funnels of a buried steamship. The pipe is made of heavy, galvanized steel, now coated in a thick layer of feathery rime frost. The frost grows in delicate, hexagonal structures, each one a perfect, frozen geometry that would take an artist hours to render with a fine-tipped pencil. The guard reaches out and brushes his gloved hand against the frost. It doesn't melt. It simply shatters, falling to the ground like a handful of salt. From within the pipe, he hears the low, rhythmic thrum of the air being drawn into the vault's cooling system. It is a deep, resonant sound, a B-flat that vibrates in the hollow of his throat. This is the sound of the permafrost being maintained, the sound of the mountain being kept at a constant, unyielding temperature. The guard's thoughts drift to the first room of the vault, the one closest to the entrance. In his mind, he can see the gray, plastic crates, each one labeled with a series of alphanumeric codes that represent the agricultural heritage of a nation. He thinks of the seeds from the Fertile Crescent, the wild wheats and barleys that were first domesticated by human hands 10,000 years ago. Those seeds carry the memory of the sun, of the warm, dry winds of the Levant, and of the first farmers who saved the best of their harvest for the next season. Now, they are here in the dark, in a room where the sun never shines and the wind never warms. They are being held in a state of suspended animation, their biological clocks slowed down to a crawl. The guard feels a sense of profound, heavy responsibility. He is the guardian of the memory of the sun. He is the one who ensures that the heat of the world never reaches these tiny, frozen ghosts. He continues his slow patrol, his boots making a dull, thudding sound on the packed earth. Thud, pause, breath, thud. The rhythm is so consistent that it begins to lose its meaning, becoming just another layer of the silence. He looks out over the Isfjorden, the great fjord that stretches out from the base of the mountain. In the blue-gray light of the night, the water is a flat, obsidian mirror, reflecting the faint, distant stars. The stars are not the twinkling lights of a summer evening. They are cold, hard points of white, like the heads of silver nails driven into the sky. He thinks of the celestial mechanics that govern this place, the tilt of the Earth's axis that plunges the island into darkness for months at a time. It is a boring, astronomical fact, a matter of degrees and rotations, but it creates a world that feels like a dream. On a dark blue board, an artist would use a soft gray pastel to smudge the horizon line, making it impossible to tell where the frozen sea ends and the frozen sky begins. The wind picks up again, and this time it carries the faint, metallic scent of the sea ice. It is a clean, sharp smell devoid of any organic life. It is the smell of the absolute zero, the scent of a world without a heartbeat. The guard pulls his hood tighter around his face, the fur trim tickling his forehead. The fur is synthetic, designed to shed the moisture of his breath, but even so, it is beginning to stiffen with frost. He feels the cold air searching for a gap in his defenses, a tiny path of least resistance through the seams of his coat or the eyelets of his boots. He adjusts his stance, turning his back to the wind, and feels the heavy weight of the mountain behind him. The mountain is his shield. It is a mass of 300 million tons of stone, an immovable object in a world of moving air. He remembers a story he read in an old logbook from the mining days, a mundane account of a winter in the 1930s. The miner had written about the sound of the mountain shifting, a low, groaning noise that happened once every few weeks as the ice in the crevices expanded and contracted. The guard listens for that sound now. He wants to hear the mountain speak, but the mountain is silent tonight. It is holding its breath, just as he is. The only sound is the nnnnhhhhh of the cooling fans and the occasional, sharp crack of the permafrost settling. Each crack is like a pistol shot in the silence, a sudden, violent reminder of the pressure that exists beneath his feet. He thinks about the history of the 1925 Norwegian sovereignty transition, a slow, bureaucratic process that officially brought Svalbard under the crown of Norway. It was a transition of papers and proclamations, a quiet change of flags that happened while the rest of the world was busy with more loud and colorful histories. The guard finds beauty in this quietude. He likes the idea of a land that was discovered but never truly conquered, a place that exists outside the normal flow of time. The Svalbard Treaty is a boring document, full of clauses about mining rights and environmental protections, but it is the foundation of the peace he now guards. It is the reason why a man from any nation can come here and find a home in the cold. It is a triumph of the mundane over the spectacular. He reaches the far end of the plateau and looks back at the vault entrance. From this distance, the amber light of the lantern above the door is a tiny, flickering spark, like a lone candle in a cathedral of ice. The concrete portal looks like a shadow within a shadow, a darker gray against the deep blue of the stone. He imagines himself as a character in a vintage illustration, a small, dark figure rendered in charcoal, standing at the edge of a vast, pastel wilderness. The scale of the image is what matters, the way the human figure is dwarfed by the environment. In this story, the guard is not the protagonist. The cold is the protagonist. The mountain is the protagonist. The seeds are the protagonist. He is merely the witness, the one who provides the scale. He begins the walk back toward the door, his movements even slower now as the cold begins to seep into his joints. His knees feel heavy, as if they were made of the same siltstone as the mountain. He does not fight the stiffness, he incorporates it into his gait. He becomes a part of the slow, rhythmic movement of the night. Step, pause, step, pause. He thinks of the seeds again, specifically the varieties of rice from the Philippines and the maize from the mountains of Mexico. They are so far from home. They are the ultimate travelers, having journeyed across oceans and continents to find their way to this frozen sanctuary. They are the biological heritage of humanity, and they are sleeping in a bed of ice. The guard stops and looks at his watch. It is an analog watch, its mechanical movement unaffected by the cold. The second hand moves with a tiny, rhythmic jerk, a small, silver line cutting through the circle of time. Tick, tick, tick. In the silence of the Arctic, the sound of the watch is as loud as a drum. He realizes that he has been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, lost in the texture of the dark. This is the goal of his duty, to become so still that time itself seems to stop. To become a part of the permafrost. The sky begins to change again, the deep indigo shifting toward a slightly paler shade of slate. It is not the approach of dawn. Dawn is still weeks away, but a subtle shift in the atmospheric pressure, a thinning of the clouds that allows a faint, ghostly luminescence to filter down from the stars. The world remains a study in gray and blue, a soft pencil drawing made on a dark, textured surface. The guard takes a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with a heavy, cold satisfaction. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault. He is the keeper of the Doomsday Room, and the silence of the mountain is his only reward. The amber light of the lantern above the vault's entrance is a lonely, shivering thing. It does not so much illuminate the concrete portal as it does define the boundaries of the overwhelming dark. To look at it is to see a single, warm smudge on a canvas of deep, charcoal blue, a drawing made with a blunt orange pastel that has been smudged by a heavy thumb. The guard stands beneath this light, his shadow cast long and thin across the frozen ground, stretching out toward the abyss of the valley below. The shadow is a dark, jagged line, a charcoal stroke that moves only when he breathes. He watches the shadow of his own head, a rounded shape capped by the ruff of his hood, and he thinks of how small he is compared to the mountain. The mountain is an ancient, silent giant, and he is merely a parasite of warmth clinging to its cold, gray skin. He reaches for the heavy handle of the outer door. The steel is cold, a dry, biting cold that seems to bypass the thick leather of his gloves and seep directly into the marrow of his bones. This door is the first of many barriers, a massive slab of reinforced metal designed to withstand the crushing weight of the mountain and the scouring force of the wind. He pulls, and the sound of the door opening is a low, industrial groan, a sound of heavy hinges and thick grease resisting the sub-zero temperatures. It is a slow, methodical sound, a long kriak that echoes off the concrete walls of the portal. The guard moves with the door, his boots scraping against the metal threshold with a dry, rasping sound. Inside, the air changes. It is no longer the wild, moving air of the mountain. It is a still, recycled air, a dry and sterile atmosphere that smells faintly of cold grease and static electricity. The history of this interior space is a history of containment. When the vault was first excavated, the engineers had to account for the way the heat of the machines and the heat of the human workers would interact with the permafrost. They built the tunnel with a specific slope, a downward incline that leads 120 meters into the heart of the sandstone. The guard begins his descent. Each step he takes is a step away from the sky and a step deeper into the geological memory of the earth. The floor is made of metal grates, and the sound of his boots on the steel is a hollow, rhythmic clink clink clink. In the soft pencil world of the tunnel, the light is provided by a row of recessed lamps in the ceiling. They cast a flat gray light that reflects off the damp concrete walls, creating a sense of being inside a great, frozen ribcage. He thinks of the Nordic gene bank, the precursor to this global effort. It was a project born in the late 1970s, a boring and necessary collaboration between the nations of the North. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the cold was not an enemy to be fought, but a resource to be utilized. They stored their seeds in an abandoned coal mine, a dark and dusty place where the permafrost provided a natural, stable environment. That was the seed of the idea that became this vault. It was a history of meetings, of feasibility studies, of international treaties signed in quiet rooms in Oslo and Copenhagen. It was a history of people looking at the horizon and seeing the need for a backup drive for the planet. The guard finds a deep, rhythmic comfort in this history. It is a story of foresight, of people who were willing to invest in a future they would never see. The tunnel walls are textured with a fine layer of moisture that has frozen into a crystalline skin. In the dim, gray light, the ice looks like a coating of powdered sugar, a delicate white crust over the dark, rough concrete. The guard stops and runs his finger along the wall. The ice comes away in a fine, dry dust, leaving a dark smudge where his glove touched the rock. He thinks of the drawings of this tunnel, long, perspective-heavy sketches made with a gray lead pencil. The lines would converge at a single point in the distance, a point that represents the absolute center of the mountain. He follows those lines with his eyes, his gaze moving down the long, sloping corridor. There is no wind here, yet the air feels heavy, as if the weight of the rock above is pressing down on the atmosphere itself. He reaches the first of the two airlocks. This is a space of transition, a small concrete chamber where the air pressure is equalized and the temperature is strictly controlled. He enters the chamber and hears the heavy door hiss shut behind him. The sound of the seal engaging is a sharp, metallic thunk, followed by a long, slow exhale of compressed air. He stands in the silence of the airlock, waiting for the green light to signal that the next door is ready. In this small space, the sound of his own heart is the most prominent thing. It is a slow, steady drumbeat, a reminder of the life he carries within his layers. He thinks of the seeds on the other side of the next door, millions of tiny hearts that are not beating but waiting. They are in a state of stasis, a biological pause that could last for centuries. The green light flickers to life, a small emerald spark in the gray gloom. The guard presses the button to open the inner door. This door is even heavier than the first, a massive, lead-lined barrier that keeps the deep cold of the vault from escaping. It opens with a slow, hydraulic hiss, revealing the second section of the tunnel. Here, the temperature drops significantly. He can feel the change through his coat, a sudden, sharp intensification of the cold that makes the air feel thick and heavy. His breath emerges in a dense, white cloud that lingers in the air, a ghost of a man standing in a corridor of ice. He moves forward, his boots continuing their hollow rhythm on the metal floor. The history of the Global Crop Diversity Trust is a history of administrative patience. It is an organization dedicated to the boring but essential task of ensuring that the world's agricultural heritage is not lost to war, climate change, or simple neglect. The Guard thinks of the millions of dollars raised, the thousands of hours of negotiation, and the endless paperwork required to bring seeds from every corner of the globe to this one, frozen spot. It is a triumph of bureaucracy over entropy. The seeds are the physical manifestation of this effort, packets of life that have been cleaned, dried, and cataloged with an almost obsessive attention to detail. They are the survivors of a world that is often too loud and too fast, finding their peace here, in the slow, silent heart of the Arctic. To his right, a series of large, industrial compressors sit in a recessed alcove. They are the lungs of the vault, the machines that supplement the natural cold of the permafrost to reach the required -18 degrees. They hum with a low-frequency vibration that the Guard can feel in his chest. It is a steady, unyielding sound, a NNNNNNN that never changes pitch. He stops to inspect the gauges. The needles are all in the green zones, their thin, black lines pointing toward stability. He records the numbers in his mind, a series of digits that represent the health of the mountain. The history of refrigeration is another boring and fascinating topic, the slow discovery of how to manipulate the laws of thermodynamics to create a pocket of eternal winter. The Guard appreciates the machines. They are honest. They do exactly what they were designed to do, without complaint and without fatigue. He continues his walk, the tunnel curving slightly to follow the natural contours of the rock. The concrete here is thicker, reinforced with steel beams that catch the dim light. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the artist would use a heavy charcoal pencil to define the shadows under the beams, creating a sense of massive architectural strength. The Guard feels this strength. He feels protected by the mountain. Outside, the world might be a place of storms and uncertainty, but here, everything is certain. The temperature is 18 degrees below zero. The seeds are safe. The rock is 300 meters thick. It is a sanctuary of the mundane, a cathedral built to protect the most basic of human needs: the need to eat, the need to grow, the need to continue. He thinks about the specific seeds that have arrived recently. A shipment of wild peas from a research station in the mountains of Georgia. A collection of drought-resistant beans from a small village in the dry corridor of Central America. These seeds are not just biological material. They are the result of thousands of years of human observation and selection. They are the products of a boring and essential history, the history of people noticing that one plant survived a frost while another did not, and saving the seeds of the survivor. The Guard is the final link in that chain. He is the one who ensures that the chain is not broken by the passage of time. He is the curator of the survival of the species. The tunnel opens up into a larger chamber, a cathedral-like space where 3 massive vault doors are embedded in the rock. Only one of these doors is currently in use, the others held in reserve for a future when the first vault is full. The doors are painted a dull, industrial gray, their surfaces covered in a fine layer of frost. The guard approaches the middle door, the one that holds the treasure. He does not open it. His duty is to guard the entrance, not to disturb the sleepers. He stands in front of the door and places his gloved hand on the cold steel. He can feel the absolute silence on the other side. It is a silence so deep it feels like a physical weight, a density of non-existence. He thinks of the seeds inside, tucked into their foil envelopes. They are arranged in plastic crates, which are in turn stacked on metal shelving units that reach from the floor to the ceiling. Each crate is a library of potential. If the world were to burn or to flood or to fall into a long, dark age of ignorance, the contents of this room could bring it back to life. The guard is awed by the simplicity of it. All the complexity of modern civilization, the satellites, the computers, the cities of glass and steel, all of it depends on the ability to put a seed in the ground and have it grow. He is guarding the foundation of everything. And he does it by standing in a cold, dark room and listening to the hum of a machine. The visual of this chamber in a soft pastel drawing would be a study in chiaroscuro. The gray of the vault doors would be the mid-tone, with the shadows of the rock being the deep black and the frost on the metal being the bright white highlight. The guard would be a small, dark figure in the foreground, his lantern casting a faint amber glow on the floor. It is a scene of immense, quiet power. There is no need for grand gestures or loud voices. The mountain speaks for itself. The history of the stone and the history of the seeds are one and the same, a story of long, slow endurance. He turns and begins the long walk back toward the surface. The ascent is more difficult, the slope of the tunnel working against his heavy, insulated boots. He breathes slowly, the cold air burning slightly in the back of his throat. He does not hurry. He moves with the same rhythmic pace, his boots clicking on the metal grates. Clink, pause, clink, pause. He is moving back toward the light, back toward the sky and the wind. But he leaves a part of himself behind in the dark, a part of his spirit that remains with the seeds. He is the bridge between the world of the sun and the world of the frost. As he reaches the first airlock again, he stops and looks back down the tunnel. The perspective lines seem to pull at him, drawing his gaze back into the depths of the mountain. He feels a sense of profound peace. His duty is simple and his purpose is clear. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault. He is the protector of the Doomsday Room. He enters the airlock, and as the heavy door hisses shut, he prepares to face the wind once more. The mountain remains steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe, and the night, the long, violet night of the Arctic, continues its slow and silent rotation. The transition from the still, recycled air of the tunnel back to the living breath of the mountain is a slow, heavy process. The guard stands in the small vestibule between the inner and outer doors, waiting for the pressure to equalize. In the dim, amber light of this transition chamber, the world feels like a drawing that has been left unfinished, the lines of the concrete walls trailing off into a hazy, charcoal smudge. On a dark blue board, an artist would use a soft, gray pastel to create the illusion of depth here, smudging the edges with a finger to suggest the way the cold air begins to thicken as it meets the exterior world. The guard feels the weight of his own stillness. He is a vertical line in a world of horizontal pressures. He waits for the mechanical hiss of the outer seal, a sound that is as dry and rhythmic as the movement of a clock. When it finally comes, it is a long, slow release of breath, a metallic sigh that signals his return to the polar night. He steps back out onto the concrete platform, and the wind is there to greet him. It is not a violent wind tonight, but a steady, leaning presence that smells of deep space and frozen salt. It catches the edges of his heavy wool coat, making the fabric thud softly against his legs. The sound is like a muffled drum, a low-frequency pulse that anchors him to the ground. He looks out at the landscape, which has become a study in indigo and slate. In the visual language of the soft pastel style, there are no sharp boundaries here. The mountain flows into the sky, and the sky flows into the sea, all of them rendered in varying shades of midnight blue. The only point of contrast is the faint, warm glow of his lantern, a small, amber circle that seems to tremble against the vastness of the Arctic. The history of the mountain, Platyburget, is a history of slow, sedimentary accumulation. The guard thinks of the layers of siltstone and sandstone beneath his boots, each one representing an epoch of time that is almost impossible to comprehend. Long before the seeds were a concept, long before the vault was carved into the rock, these layers were being laid down in the bed of an ancient, warm sea. It is a boring and magnificent history, a story of grains of sand settling one by one, year after year, for millions of years. The guard finds comfort in this. To him, the vault is not a modern intrusion but a continuation of the mountain's purpose. The mountain has always been a keeper of records. It holds the fossils of prehistoric plants and the black veins of ancient forests. Now it holds the seeds. It is a vessel of time, and the guard is its temporary steward. He begins his patrol of the outer perimeter, his boots making a slow, rhythmic groan in the frozen dust. Step, pause, breath, step. He moves toward the edge of the plateau, where a small weather station stands like a skeletal sentinel. The station is a collection of silver rods and spinning vanes, all of them coated in a delicate, feathery rime frost. In the light of his lantern, the frost looks like lace made of frozen mercury. He stops to check the anemometer, the small cup spinning with a low, metallic whir-whir-whir. The sound is hypnotic, a repetitive melody that matches the beating of his own heart. He thinks of the meteorologists in Longyearbyen who monitor these readings, men and women who spend their days looking at graphs and charts. Theirs is a history of data, of measuring the slow, incremental changes in the atmosphere. It is a history of numbers, and the guard appreciates the precision of it. The history of the Svalbard Seed Vault's construction is a story of materials. The guard remembers reading about the specific mix of concrete used for the portal, a high-strength, frost-resistant aggregate designed to withstand the freeze-thaw cycles of the Arctic. It was a boring, technical challenge, a matter of chemistry and engineering. The engineers had to consider the thermal conductivity of the rock, the way the heat from the sun would penetrate the mountain during the brief summer months. They designed the vault to be a passive system, relying on the natural cold of the permafrost to do the work. The guard thinks of the thermal sensors buried deep in the rock, tiny electronic eyes that watch the temperature of the mountain. They are part of a global network of monitoring, a boring and essential bureaucracy of science. The sky above is a deep, resonant violet, the color of a heavy pastel applied with great pressure. There are no clouds now, and the stars are visible in their millions. They do not twinkle. They glow with a steady, hard light, like chips of white flint. The guard looks up, his neck stiffening as he tilts his head back. He thinks of the celestial mechanics that govern the polar night, the way the Earth's tilt hides the sun from this part of the world for months at a time. It is a story of orbits and angles, an astronomical boredom that dictates the rhythm of his life. He is a creature of the dark, a man who has learned to see in the gradients of blue and gray. He does not miss the sun. The sun is a bringer of change, and change is the enemy of the seeds. Here, in the darkness, everything is safe. He moves his gaze to the horizon, where the lights of Longyearbyen are a faint, amber smudge. He thinks of the history of the town, named after John Munro Longyear, the man who saw the potential in the black stone. The history of the Arctic is often framed as a struggle of man against nature, but the Guard sees it as a history of cooperation. The miners, the scientists, the guards, they all work with the mountain, not against it. They have learned the rules of the cold. They have learned that to survive here, one must move slowly, breathe deeply, and respect the silence. The Guard feels a kinship with the miners who came before him. He is also a man of the mountain, a man who spends his hours in the dark, watching over the treasures of the earth. He reaches the far corner of the plateau and looks down into the valley. In the soft pencil drawing of this scene, the valley would be a deep obsidian shadow, a void that swallows all light. But the Guard knows what is there. He knows the shape of the old tramway pillars, the abandoned mining equipment, and the frozen tracks of the polar bears. He hears the wind moving through the valley, a low, mournful sound like the bowing of a double bass. It is a sound of immense weight and sadness, the sound of the world's end and its beginning. He closes his eyes and lets the sound wash over him, feeling the vibration in his chest. He is part of the music of the mountain. His thoughts drift to the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. It is a long and boring title for a document that represents one of the greatest achievements of human cooperation. The treaty is the legal foundation of the Vault, an agreement between nations to share and protect the world's seeds. The Guard thinks of the diplomats and lawyers who drafted the treaty, sitting in rooms far away from the ice and the wind. Theirs was a history of words, of clauses and subclauses, of carefully negotiated compromises. It is a history that lacks the drama of a polar expedition, but it is the reason he is standing here tonight. The Vault is a monument to the power of the mundane, the power of people to agree on something simple and essential. He turns back toward the vault entrance, the amber light of the lamp above the door drawing him in. He checks his watch. It has been 4 hours since he began his shift. Time here does not move in a straight line. It moves in a slow, circular crawl, like the movement of the stars. He thinks of the seeds inside, the millions of tiny lives that are suspended in time. He thinks of the specific varieties of maize from the mountains of Mexico, seeds that have been passed down through generations of farmers. Each seed is a tiny, dried history of a family, a village, a culture. Now they are all here, stripped of their names and their soil, reduced to their biological essence. They are the survivors of history, and the Guard is their witness. The visual of the Vault's portal in the soft pastel style is a study in texture and shadow. The concrete is rendered with heavy gray strokes, the frost on its surface highlighted with a sharp white pencil. The Guard himself is a dark silhouette, his coat a deep charcoal that absorbs the light. The only warmth in the image is the amber glow of the lantern, a small, wavering fire in a world of ice. It is an image of profound loneliness, but also of profound peace. The Guard does not feel lonely. He feels connected to the mountain, to the seeds, and to the boring history of the world. He is a part of the stillness. He reaches the door and pauses, his hand resting on the cold steel. He thinks of the permafrost, the frozen ground that reaches down hundreds of meters into the rock. The history of the permafrost is the history of the Earth's climate, a frozen record of thousands of years of cold. The Vault is built to last for 1,000 years, a span of time that is a mere blink in the eyes of the mountain, but an eternity in the eyes of men. The Guard feels the weight of that millennium. He is a small, temporary link in a very long chain. He does not mind his insignificance. In fact, he welcomes it. To be small in the face of the mountain is to be free from the burden of self-importance. The wind shifts again, carrying a fine spray of ice crystals that sting his eyes. He blinks, the frozen moisture on his eyelashes clicking softly. It is a small, intimate sound, the only thing he can hear besides the wind and the low hum of the cooling system. He feels the cold air inside his lungs, a heavy, solid presence that reminds him of his own mortality. He is a warm-blooded creature in a world that is fundamentally cold. He is a spark of life in a landscape of stone. He takes a deep breath, letting the air warm in his throat before it reaches his lungs. He is ready for the next hour. He is ready for the next century. He looks at his hands, encased in the thick, rough wool of his gloves. They are the hands of a worker, hands that have learned to handle the cold. He thinks of the many hands that have contributed to this project, the hands of the scientists who cataloged the seeds, the hands of the construction workers who poured the concrete, the hands of the farmers who saved the seeds in the first place. All of those hands are represented here, in this quiet, frozen spot. The vault is a collective work of humanity, a boring and magnificent testament to our desire to continue. The guard begins to walk again, his footsteps a rhythmic prayer to the endurance of the earth. Step, pause, the mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault, the protector of the Doomsday Room. And as the long, violet night continues its slow and silent rotation, he remains at his post, a silent sentinel in the heart of the polar dark. The history of the world is written in the stone and the ice, and he is the one who reads it in the silence. The light from his lantern catches a small, frozen pool of meltwater in a crevice of the rock. The ice is clear and dark, looking like a piece of obsidian. In the soft pastel drawing, the artist would use a thin line of white to show the reflection of the stars in the ice. The guard stops to look at it, marveling at the way the universe is reflected in a single, frozen moment. Everything is connected. The stars, the ice, the seeds, and the guard. They are all part of the same, slow, boring history. They are all part of the stillness. He continues his walk, his movements slow and deliberate. He is not in a hurry. There is nowhere else to be. His life has become a meditation on the nature of duty, a long-form story of silent endurance. He is the witness to the night. He is the guardian of the quiet. And the mountain remains, a dark, heavy mass in a world of blue shadows and soft, pastel light. The silence is absolute. The cold is eternal. He is the guard, and his watch is only beginning. The darkness surrounding the mountain is not a void, but a texture, a deep, layered composition of indigo and charcoal that feels as though it were applied to the world with a heavy, blunt pastel. The guard stands at the edge of the service road, a narrow strip of frozen gravel that has been carved into the side of the slope. In the visual language of this story, the gravel is rendered with short, sharp strokes of a gray-brown pencil, each stone a minute detail lost in the broader smudge of the mountain's shadow. The guard looks down at his boots, noting how the fine, white dust of the permafrost has settled into the creases of the leather. On a dark surface, this would be represented by a delicate application of white graphite, a faint shimmer that highlights the shape of the foot against the blackness of the ground. The cold here is an architect. It builds structures of frost on every available surface, turning a simple iron railing into a jagged sculpture of crystal and salt. He moves his arm, and the sound of his parka rubbing against his wool sweater is a low, rhythmic shhh. It is a sound that signifies the passage of time in a world where the sun has forgotten to rise. He thinks of the history of the materials that surround him, the galvanized steel of the railings, the reinforced concrete of the portal, the high-density plastic of the seed crates. This is a history of industrial chemistry and structural engineering, a boring and meticulous chronicle of how humanity learned to defy the corrosive power of the Arctic. He remembers reading a technical manual about the specific type of paint used on the vault's exterior fixtures, a specialized epoxy, resin designed to remain flexible at temperatures where most substances become as brittle as glass. The guard finds a strange, hypnotic satisfaction in these details. He is a man who appreciates the integrity of things that are built to last. He is the witness to the endurance of the mundane. The air he breathes is so dry that it feels thin, a ghostly substance that carries the faint, metallic scent of the mountain's mineral heart. He thinks of the history of the black box system, the legal framework that governs the vault. It is a boring and essential arrangement, a protocol of trust and sovereignty. Each nation that deposits seeds here retains full ownership of its samples. The vault is merely a safe deposit box in a mountain made of ice. The guards do not open the boxes. The scientists do not catalog the individual seeds inside. They are sealed units, small, gray capsules of potential that belong to people thousands of miles away. The history of this arrangement is one of legal documents and diplomatic cables, a quiet, paper-heavy history that ensures the seeds remain a global heritage. The guard feels the weight of this trust. He is not just guarding seeds, he is guarding an agreement. He is the physical manifestation of a promise made between nations. To his left, a large, industrial vent stands like a square chimney against the dark blue of the sky. From deep within the rock, he hears the rhythmic click-clink of a thermal relay, followed by the low, distant groan of a compressor. It is the sound of the vault's mechanical life, a heartbeat that is regular and unhurried. He closes his eyes and imagines the three-ply foil envelopes inside the crates. He thinks of the specific layers of the foil, the outer layer of polyester for strength, the middle layer of aluminum for a moisture barrier, and the inner layer of polyethylene for a heat-sealable finish. This is the history of the envelopes, a story of material science and food preservation. It is a history of keeping the world out. The seeds are tucked inside these layers, protected from the air, the light, and the passage of years. They are the ultimate introverts, curled into themselves in a dreamless sleep. The sky above begins to display a faint, ghostly luminescence, not the bright, dancing curtains of a strong aurora, but a subtle, static glow of pale green that hangs behind the clouds like a watercolor wash. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the artist would use a very soft, pale green pastel, blending it into the charcoal sky until the boundary is almost invisible. The light is so weak that it does not cast a shadow, but it gives the landscape a sense of depth, a hazy, three-dimensional quality that makes the mountain feel even larger than it is. The guard watches the light, his eyes unblinking. He does not find it spectacular, he finds it heavy. It is the light of a world that is far away, a reminder of the vast, cold electromagnetic forces that swirl around the planet. He is a creature of the earth, a man of stone and wool, standing beneath the silent fire of the heavens. He continues his walk, his steps falling with a rhythmic, muffled thud. Step, pause, breath, step. The rhythm is his anchor. It prevents his mind from drifting too far into the blue-gray void. He thinks of the history of the Nordic gene bank's relocation, the slow and careful transit of the original seed collection from the old coal mine to this new, purpose-built fortress. It was a history of logistics, of crates being labeled and cross-referenced, of trucks moving slowly over frozen roads. It was a boring and vital operation, a migration of life that happened in the dead of winter. The guard imagines the scientists who oversaw the move, their fingers stiff with cold as they checked the manifests. They were the architects of this stillness. They were the ones who decided that the mountain was the safest place on Earth. He reaches a small, concrete bunker that houses the backup generators. The door is thick and heavy, with a small, circular window that is currently frosted over with a thick layer of ice. He rubs a small patch of the glass with his thumb, the heat of his body creating a tiny, blurred portal into the interior. Inside, the machines sit in the dark, their yellow paint looking dull and olive-colored in the shadows. They are silent now, but they are ready. The history of these generators is a history of contingency. They are the what-ifs made of iron and oil. They are there for the day the power grid fails, for the day the world outside becomes too loud or too broken to provide for the mountain. The guard feels a kinship with these machines. He too is a contingency. He is the human fail-safe, the one who stays awake when everything else is asleep. The wind picks up a single, long strand note, a vibration that seems to come from the very edges of the plateau. It is a hollow, piping sound, like air moving over the mouth of a glass bottle. He stops to listen to it, his head tilted. It is the music of the Arctic, a composition of emptiness and pressure. In the soft pastel world of his watch, this sound has a color, a thin, vibrating line of silver gray that cuts through the indigo. He feels the cold pressing against his temples, a slow, tightening sensation that makes his skin feel like parchment. He does not mind. The cold is the truth of this place. To feel it is to know where you are. He thinks about the history of the international treaty again, specifically the multilateral system that allows for the exchange of plant genetic resources. It is a boring and beautiful concept, the idea that the genetic code of a crop belongs to everyone, that it is a common language of survival. He thinks of the seeds from the ancient varieties of emmer wheat, seeds that carry the history of the first civilizations. Those seeds have survived wars, famines, and the rise and fall of empires, only to end up here, in a plastic crate in the permafrost. They are the ultimate survivors, and their history is the history of humanity itself. The guard is the final chapter of that history, the one who stands watch over the library while the world waits for the next spring. He turns his gaze back toward the Isfjorden. The black water is indistinguishable from the black of the mountains on the other side, creating a sense of being at the edge of a great dark abyss. Somewhere in that darkness, the sea ice is thickening, a slow and silent expansion of the frozen world. He can hear the distant, low-pitched crack of the ice sheets, a sound like a heavy timber snapping in a deep forest. It is the sound of the earth shifting its weight, of the seasons exerting their slow, inevitable pressure. The guard feels this pressure in his own bones. He is a part of the landscape, a geological feature that happens to breathe. The visual of the mountain face to his right is a study in verticality. The layers of siltstone are stacked like the pages of a massive, frozen book, their edges highlighted by the faint green glow from the sky. In the vintage drawing, the artist would use a sharp charcoal pencil to define the crevices, creating a sense of immense weight and age. The guard runs his hand along the stone, feeling the grit and the cold. This rock has been here for 60 million years. The vault has been here for less than 20. The seeds have been here for only a few. In the time scale of the mountain, everything human is a fleeting smudge of color. He likes this thought. It makes his duty feel less like a burden and more like a privilege. He is a momentary guardian of an eternal silence. He walks back toward the main portal, the amber light of the lamp drawing him in like a moth. The light is weak and wavering, casting a long, distorted shadow of his body onto the snow. He looks at his shadow, noting the way it stretches and bends over the uneven ground. It is a dark, charcoal shape that seems to have a life of its own. He stops and watches it for a moment, fascinated by the way it mimics his movements with a slight, rhythmic delay. In the soft pencil drawing of this moment, the shadow would be the darkest thing on the page, a hole in the world that swallows the light. The hum of the cooling system is louder near the portal, a steady NNNNNNN that vibrates through the concrete. It is a comforting sound, a reminder that the machines are still working, that the seeds are still cold, that the plan is still in motion. The history of the vault is a history of plans, plans for the next year, the next decade, the next century. It is a story of long-term thinking in a world that is obsessed with the immediate. The guard is the guardian of the long term. He is the one who ensures that the future has a foundation. He reaches the door and checks the seal once more. He looks for any sign of ice buildup that might prevent the door from opening, any hint that the mountain is trying to reclaim the space. Everything is as it should be. The frost is light and feathery, the steel is cold and true. He leans his back against the wall, feeling the cold seep through his coat. He is tired, but it is a good tiredness, a heavy, rhythmic fatigue that matches the pace of the night. He takes a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs with a dry, satisfying pressure. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault. He is the protector of the Doomsday Room. And the night, the long, indigo night of the Arctic, continues its slow and silent rotation. The light of his lantern catches a single drifting snowflake. It is not a soft, fluffy flake of the south, but a hard, crystalline needle of ice that glitters for a fraction of a second before vanishing into the dark. It is a tiny, fleeting beauty, a moment of clarity in the grainy, pastel haze. The guard watches it go, a small smile hidden behind his scarf. He is the witness to the small things. He is the keeper of the quiet. And as he continues his patrol, his footsteps a rhythmic prayer to the endurance of the earth, he knows that the seeds are safe. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep, and the silence is absolute. The weight of the silence atop the mountain plateau is not an absence of sound, but a presence that has its own density, much like the heavy, textured paper used for a pastel drawing. The guard stands in the shadow of the great concrete portal, his breath rising in a slow, rhythmic plume that looks like a smudge of white chalk against a deep indigo background. In the visual language of this story, the world is rendered with short, deliberate strokes of a charcoal pencil, layered over with soft, hazy washes of slate and midnight blue. The guard's lantern, a heavy iron relic that feels more like a piece of the mountain than a tool of man, casts a low, amber glow that barely reaches his own boots. The light is weak, flickering slightly as the wick consumes the oil in a slow, internal fire. This light does not reveal the path ahead. It only confirms the existence of the ground beneath his feet, a frozen, gravelly surface where each pebble is coated in a fine, crystalline layer of hoarfrost. He thinks about the history of the technical rectification of the vault, a period in the year 2017 that was defined by the boring and essential science of hydrology. It was a time when the mountain's surface began to soften in a way it hadn't in 10,000 years, and the engineers had to return to the rock to ensure the seeds remained dry. The guard remembers reading the reports, mundane, multi-page documents filled with data on thermal conductivity and watertight membranes. They built a new, waterproof entrance tunnel, a massive structure of reinforced concrete that was designed to be as unyielding as the permafrost itself. This is the history he guards, a history of maintenance, of fixing what the wind and the thaw try to break. It is a story of cooling pipes buried deep in the floor, of heat exchangers that hum in the dark, and of a drainage system that is never supposed to be used. He feels the solidity of this new tunnel through his boots, a hard, engineering truth that stands between the seeds and the changing world. The cold has a way of slowing the blood until the guard's heartbeat feels like the rhythmic ticking of a heavy clock in a distant room. He moves his hands within his thick, wool-lined gloves, feeling the slow friction of the fabric. The sound is a dull, dry rasp, like a pencil moving across a rough board. He looks up at the artwork that crowns the vault's entrance, perpetual echo by the artist Divek San. In the dark, the installation of mirrors and fiber optics is supposed to catch the polar light and reflect it back into the sky. But tonight, in the deep of the winter, it is a silent, jagged crown of glass and steel. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the artist would use a sharp, white-colored pencil to highlight the edges of the mirrors, creating a series of cold, geometric sparks against the charcoal sky. The artwork is a monument to the light that isn't there, a reflection of a sun that remains below the horizon for months on end. The guard finds comfort in its stillness. It does not move, it only waits. He begins a slow patrol toward the perimeter fence, a series of heavy metal posts linked by thick, galvanized wire. Each post is encrusted with a thick layer of frost that has grown horizontally against the wind, forming long, feathery needles of ice that look like the wings of a frozen bird. He reaches out a gloved hand and touches the wire, feeling the vibration of the wind moving through the metal. It is a low, humming note, a B-flat that seems to resonate in the hollow of his chest. This is the sound of the island's isolation. He thinks of the Svalbard Science Forum, a boring and meticulous organization that coordinates the research of dozens of nations on this archipelago. Their history is a history of spreadsheets, of permission forms, and of coordinates plotted on a map. They are the ones who measure the thickness of the ice and the salinity of the sea, turning the wild Arctic into a series of data points. The guard is a data point himself, the human variable in the equation of preservation. The sky above is a study in gradients. Near the horizon, it is a bruised, heavy purple, but as his eyes travel upward, it shifts into a resonant, lightless black. There are no stars in this quadrant of the sky tonight, only the vast, heavy pressure of the atmosphere. He imagines the drawing being made, the artist's hand moving in slow, circular motions to blend the dark blue into the black, creating a sense of infinite, cold space. The air he breathes is so dry that it catches in his throat, a sharp, metallic sensation that tastes of ancient stone. He thinks of the history of the permafrost measurement stations, the small, wooden huts scattered across the island where scientists have spent decades recording the temperature of the ground. It is a history of waiting for a thermometer to move a fraction of a degree. It is a history of boredom in the service of the future. The guard feels a deep kinship with those invisible scientists. He, too, is waiting for the mountain to remain exactly as it is. He shifts his weight, and the snow beneath his feet groans with a low, settling hiss. It is not the sound of fresh snow, but of old, compressed ice that has become as hard as the sandstone it covers. He looks down at his shadow, which is cast long and wavering by the amber light of the vault's portal. The shadow is a dark, charcoal smudge that stretches out toward the edge of the plateau, disappearing into the blue-gray void of the valley. He thinks of the history of the 1920 Spitsbergen Treaty, specifically Article 9, which decreed that the island should never be used for warlike purposes. It is a boring and beautiful clause, a piece of legal prose that turned this mountain into a sanctuary. The vault is the ultimate expression of that treaty, a fortress that holds no weapons, only life. The guard is the only soldier in this demilitarized zone, and his only weapon is his patience. The hum of the vault's cooling system changes pitch slightly, a subtle shift that only someone who has stood in this silence for hours would notice. It is a deeper, more resonant thrum, the sound of the compressors working to maintain the -80-degree equilibrium. He thinks of the history of the seed shipments, the long, bureaucratic process of moving crates from places like Aleppo, Lima, or Addis Ababa to this frozen rock. He remembers the shipment from the International Center for Agricultural Research in the dry areas, thousands of boxes of black seeds, arriving in the wake of a world that was falling apart. The history of those seeds is not told in the stories of the people who grew them, but in the shipping manifests, the customs forms, and the plastic seals on the crates. It is a history of logistics, of moving life across borders with the same clinical care one would use for a piece of heavy machinery. The guard is the final step in that logistics chain. He is the one who watches the door once the manifest is signed. His eyes begin to grow heavy, the cold acting as a slow, rhythmic sedative. He does not fight the feeling, but incorporates it into his watch. He becomes a part of the stillness, a dark, vertical shape rendered in soft charcoal. He thinks of the way the permafrost was first described by the explorer Carl Pedersen in the late 19th century, as a frozen heart that never thaws. It was a boring, scientific observation that became the foundation of this entire project. The guard feels that frozen heart beneath him, a solid, unyielding mass of ice and rock that stretches down 500 meters into the earth. It is the most stable thing in his world. It is the anchor of the future. He reaches the edge of the service road and looks out toward the lights of the airport, miles away across the frozen fjord. The lights are tiny, flickering sparks of amber and white, looking fragile against the overwhelming blue of the night. He thinks of the history of the airport's construction in the 1970s, a project that required the same engineering of the permafrost that the vault uses today. They had to build the runway on a bed of insulating gravel to keep the heat of the planes from melting the ground. It is a history of gravel, of layers, of keeping the cold where it belongs. The guard takes a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with a heavy, satisfying cold. He is the guardian of the layers. He is the keeper of the gravel. He turns his back on the distant lights and begins the long, slow walk back toward the vault. Each step is a meditation on the nature of duty. Thud, pause, breath, thud. The rhythm is hypnotic, a slow-motion transit through a world of soft pastel shadows. He looks at his lantern again, noting how the frost has formed a delicate hexagonal pattern on the glass. The flame inside is a small, orange heart, protected from the wind by the thick, wavy pane. He is like that flame, he thinks, a small bit of warmth in a world of ice, protected by the heavy layers of his coat and the solid walls of the mountain. In the vintage drawing of this moment, the lantern would be the only source of warmth, a single, glowing point in a sea of cool grays and deep blues. It is a study in chiaroscuro, a balance of light and dark that defines the Arctic night. The wind picks up a fine, dry dust from the ground, swirling it around his boots in a slow, ghostly dance. The dust is not dirt, but pulverized stone and ice, the remains of the mountain being ground down by the wind. The guard watches it, fascinated by the way it catches the amber light for a fraction of a second before vanishing into the shadows. Everything here is being ground down slowly, over thousands of years. The vault is an attempt to stop that grinding, to create a pocket of time where nothing changes and nothing erodes. He is the witness to that attempt. He is the sentinel of the stasis. He reaches the portal and places his hand on the cold, gray concrete. The texture is rough and industrial, a surface that was made to endure. He thinks of the history of the concrete itself, the specific mix of Norwegian cement and Arctic aggregate that was poured here in the dark. It is a boring and magnificent history, a story of chemical reactions and structural integrity. The guard feels a sense of profound peace. He is where he is supposed to be. He is doing what he is supposed to do. The seeds are safe. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. And the night, the long, indigo night of the Svalbard winter, continues its slow and silent rotation around the axis of the earth. He is the guard, and he remains at his post, a dark silhouette in a world of soft pencil shadows and ancient, blue-gray silence. The amber light of the lantern is a low, flickering smudge in the center of the guard's vision, a small pool of warmth that seems to struggle against the immense, cold weight of the polar night. In the visual style of a vintage drawing, this light would be rendered with a blunt, ochre pastel, its edges smudged and softened to blend into the surrounding indigo shadows. The guard stands at the very edge of the plateau, looking down into the dark abyss where the mountain slopes away toward the frozen sea. He can no longer see the line where the earth ends and the water begins. The world has become a single, seamless entity of charcoal and slate, a dark blue board upon which the history of the Arctic is written in invisible ink. He feels the weight of his coat, the thick, salt-stiffened wool pressing against his shoulders with a familiar, heavy pressure. It is a garment built for endurance, a fortress of fabric that has become a second skin, absorbing the cold and the silence of the mountain until there is no longer a distinction between the man and his duty. He thinks about the history of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault feasibility study, a document produced in the year 2004 that served as the boring and essential blueprint for everything that stands here now. It was a report commissioned by the Norwegian Ministry of Agriculture and Food, a meticulous collection of data on geological stability, thermal gradients, and international legal frameworks. There was no poetry in its pages, only the dry, clinical language of risk assessment and engineering specifications. The study examined the specific properties of the sandstone and siltstone, the depth of the permafrost, and the projected sea level rises over the next 200 years. It was a history of looking forward by looking deep into the past, a boring and magnificent attempt to quantify the survival of the species. The guard finds a strange, hypnotic comfort in the memory of those technical details. He is the physical manifestation of that report, the human element that ensures the data remains true. He is the guardian of the calculations, the one who stands watch over the decimal points of eternity. His boots make a low, rhythmic groan as he turns back toward the vault entrance. Step, pause, breath, step. The sound is muffled by the heavy layers of frost that have accumulated on the ground, a dry and rasping noise that vibrates up through his shins. He looks at his hands, encased in the thick, gray wool of his mittens. They look like the hands of a statue, frozen in a gesture of eternal patience. He thinks of the history of the Global Crop Diversity Trust's endowment fund, a boring and vital financial structure that ensures the vault will remain operational for centuries to come. It is a history of banking and bureaucracy, of international donors and long-term investment strategies. It is a story of people sitting in quiet rooms in Bonn and Rome, discussing interest rates and management fees, so that a mountain in the Arctic can stay at -18 degrees. To the guard, this is the most beautiful kind of history, a history that requires no heroes, only the steady, unceasing application of administrative will. The wind picks up, a low, mournful whistle that vibrates through the galvanized wire of the perimeter fence. It is a hollow sound, the sound of air moving through an empty cathedral. The guard stops to listen, his head tilted slightly to the side. He feels the cold pressing against the small patch of exposed skin around his eyes, a sharp, tightening sensation that makes his skin feel like old parchment. He does not flinch. He has learned to accept the cold as a physical presence, a heavy blanket that he wears with pride. He thinks of the specific seeds stored in the black box system inside the mountain, the ancient varieties of sorghum from the dry plains of Sudan, the cold-hardy barleys from the highlands of Tajikistan, the wild rices from the river deltas of Southeast Asia. Each seed is a tiny, dried potential, a biological record of a world that is always changing. Here, in the heart of the permafrost, that change is arrested. Time is held in a state of suspended animation, a long, frozen pause that the guard is sworn to protect. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the artist would use a sharp, white-colored pencil to highlight the ridges of the snow, creating a sense of crystalline hardness against the soft, pastel shadows. The guard's shadow would be a long charcoal stroke, stretching out toward the dark entrance of the vault like a spectral finger. He follows his own shadow, moving slowly toward the concrete portal. The light above the door is a pale, sickly amber, a flickering spark that barely reaches the ground. He checks the exterior sensors, his eyes scanning the small, metallic housings for any sign of frost buildup or mechanical fatigue. Everything is in order. The machines are doing their work, and he is doing his. The history of the vault's cooling system is a history of thermal equilibrium, a boring and essential science of keeping the heat of the world at bay. It is a story of heat exchangers and refrigerant loops, of sensors and relays that watch the darkness so he doesn't have to. The sky above is a deep, resonant violet, the color of a heavy pastel applied with great pressure. There are no clouds now, and the stars are visible in their millions, cold and hard points of light that reflect nothing. He thinks of the history of the Svalbard Treaty once more, specifically the way it turned this archipelago into a place of peace and cooperation. It is a boring and beautiful piece of international law, a series of articles and clauses that decreed that no nation could build a fortress of war on these frozen shores. Instead, they built a fortress of life. The vault is the ultimate expression of that treaty, a monument to the idea that some things are more important than borders or politics. The guard feels the weight of this international cooperation in his own bones. He is a part of a global effort, a solitary figure in the dark who represents the collective will of humanity to continue. He reaches the heavy steel door of the vault and places his hand on the cold surface. He can feel the subtle vibration of the machinery within, a low-frequency hum that matches the pitch of the wind. He thinks of the history of the technical rectification of 2017, the year the mountain reminded the world that even the permafrost is not eternal. They had to rebuild the entrance tunnel, reinforcing it with waterproof membranes and cooling pipes to ensure that the seeds remained dry and cold. It was a boring and expensive operation, a history of drills and concrete and administrative persistence. The guard remembers the sound of the machines during that time, a loud and intrusive noise that broke the sacred silence of the mountain. Now, the silence has returned, deeper and heavier than before. He prefers the silence. It is the natural state of this place, the sound of time slowing down to a crawl. His thoughts drift to the specific scientists who have visited the vault over the years, men and women like Carrie Fowler, who spent decades advocating for the creation of this global backup drive. Their history is a history of meetings and speeches, of traveling to every corner of the globe to convince people of the importance of a tiny, dried seed. It is a history of persuasion and patience, a boring and vital struggle against the entropy of the world. The guard feels a sense of kinship with these people. He is the one who holds the line they drew in the snow. He is the final link in the chain of preservation, the one who stays awake so that the dream of the future can continue. The visual of the mountain face in the soft pastel style is a study in verticality and weight. The layers of stone are stacked like the pages of a massive, frozen book, their edges highlighted by the faint, ghostly light of the stars. In the drawing, the artist would use a heavy charcoal pencil to define the deep crevices, creating a sense of immense age and permanence. The guard runs his gloved hand along the concrete of the portal, feeling the grit and the cold. This structure was built to last for 1,000 years, a span of time that is almost impossible for a human mind to comprehend. He thinks of what the world might look like in 1,000 years, of the civilizations that might rise and fall while he stands his watch. It is a boring and magnificent thought, a reminder of his own insignificance in the face of the mountain. He begins his final patrol of the hour, his footsteps falling with a rhythmic, muffled thud on the packed gravel. Thud, pause, breath, thud. The rhythm is hypnotic, a slow-motion transit through a world of blue shadows and soft pencil light. He looks out over the Isfjorden one last time. The water is a flat, obsidian mirror, reflecting the void of the sky. Somewhere in that darkness, the sea ice is thickening, a slow and silent expansion of the frozen world. He can hear the distant, low-pitched crack of the ice sheets shifting, a sound that is more of a vibration in the gut than a noise in the ear. It is the sound of the Earth's gears turning, the slow, heavy machinery of the seasons. The guard feels this pressure in his own chest, a heavy and satisfying weight that tells him he is exactly where he is supposed to be. The light of his lantern catches a single drifting ice crystal, a tiny hexagonal needle that glitters for a second before vanishing into the dark. It is a small, fleeting beauty, a moment of clarity in the grainy, pastel haze of the Arctic night. The guard watches it go, a small smile hidden behind the thick weave of his scarf. He is the witness to the small things. He is the keeper of the quiet. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault, and his duty is a long, slow meditation on the nature of endurance. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. And the night, the long, violet night of the winter, continues its silent rotation. He turns back toward the amber light of the entrance, his movements slow and deliberate. He is not in a hurry. There is nowhere else to go. His life has become a part of the mountain's history, a boring and essential story of silent endurance. He is a dark silhouette against a world of soft pastel shadows, a guardian of the future standing in the heart of the frozen past. The silence is absolute. The cold is eternal. He reaches the door and settles into his stance, a vertical line in a land of horizontal drifts. He is the guard, and he remains at his post, a silent sentinel in the heart of the polar dark. The history of the world is written in the stone and the ice, and he is the one who reads it in the stillness. The final hour of the watch does not arrive with a fanfare or a change in the light. It simply settles over the mountain like a final, heavy layer of charcoal dust. The guard stands at his post, his boots having carved a shallow, rhythmic indentation into the frozen silt of the plateau. In the visual language of the soft pastel drawing, this indentation is a dark, smudged line, a testament to a night spent in a state of absolute, unmoving duty. The lantern in his hand is now a heavy, cold weight, its flame having burned down to a tiny, amber spark that barely casts a shadow. He watches the way the light catches the edges of the rime frost on his sleeve, a delicate, feathery structure of ice that has grown slowly over the course of the last 10 hours. On a dark blue board, an artist would use a fine-tipped, white-colored pencil to render these crystals, each one a minute geometric miracle born from the moisture of his own breath. The guard does not brush the frost away. To do so would be to interrupt the slow, natural progression of the Arctic night. He lets the ice remain, a cold badge of his endurance. He thinks about the history of the post-2100 maintenance projection, a boring and essential document that outlines the long-term structural monitoring of the vault. It is a report filled with calculations of geological subsidence, the thermal expansion of concrete, and the projected lifespan of the stainless steel shelving units inside the chambers. There is no drama in its pages, only the steady, unceasing application of foresight. The guard finds a deep, rhythmic comfort in the idea of a plan that spans centuries. It is a history that hasn't happened yet, a narrative of quiet preservation that requires nothing more than the continued presence of the cold. He feels the solidity of the mountain beneath him, a 300-million-ton anchor that holds the vault in place. The mountain doesn't care about the passage of decades. It only cares about the weight of the stone and the depth of the permafrost. The guard is a part of that indifference. He has become a geological feature, a vertical line of wool and bone in a world of horizontal ice. The wind has dropped to a low, rhythmic sigh, a sound that is almost indistinguishable from the sound of his own breathing. He closes his eyes and listens to the silence of the island. It is a thick, velvet curtain that muffles the world, turning the distant grinding of the sea ice into a low-frequency vibration that he feels in the soles of his feet. He thinks of the history of the black box, deposits from nations that no longer exist in the same way they did when the vault was founded. It is a boring and tragic history of borders shifting and names changing, while the seeds themselves remain exactly the same. Inside the vault, the envelopes from the former Soviet republics sit alongside those from the modern era, their biological contents indifferent to the politics of the sunlit world. To the guard, this is the true meaning of the Doomsday Room. It is not a place of ending, but a place of absolute, unyielding continuity. It is a library where the books are never read, only kept in a state of perfect, frozen potential. In the soft pencil world of the plateau, the sky has begun to shift into a slightly paler shade of slate. It is not the approach of dawn. The sun is still weeks away from the horizon, but a subtle thinning of the polar clouds that allows a faint, ghostly luminescence to filter down from the stars. The world remains a study in gray and blue, a textured drawing made with heavy, blunt pastels on a dark surface. The guard looks out over the Isfjorden, where the black water is dotted with small, floating chunks of ice. They look like white scales on the back of a great, dark fish, moving slowly with the tide. He thinks of the history of the Svalbard undersea cable, a boring and vital piece of infrastructure that connects the island to the rest of the world. It is a story of fiber optic lines resting in the deep, cold dark of the ocean floor, carrying the data of the vault's sensors to monitors in Oslo and Longyearbyen. The guard is the physical counterpart to that cable. He is the human connection between the mountain and the world, a silent sentinel who ensures that the silence remains uninterrupted. His hands are numb now, a dull, heavy sensation that has long since passed from pain into a state of neutral existence. He moves his fingers slowly within his mittens, feeling the dry friction of the wool. The sound is like a pencil moving across a rough sheet of paper, a low, rhythmic rasp that is the only clock he has. He thinks of the history of the Seed Vault Centenary Vision, a document that describes the vault in the year 2108. It is a boring and magnificent vision of a world where the mountain remains at -18 degrees, even if the world around it has changed beyond recognition. The guard finds a strange, hypnotic peace in this vision. He does not need to know what the future looks like. He only needs to know that it is being preserved. He is the guardian of the baseline, the one who ensures that the starting point for the next civilization remains frozen in time. The hum of the cooling system is a steady, unyielding NNNNNNN that vibrates through the concrete portal of the vault. It is a sound of immense weight and stability, a mechanical heartbeat that never falters. He thinks of the history of the redundant power systems, the layers of backup generators and battery banks that stand ready to take over if the main grid fails. It is a history of just in case, a boring and essential chronicle of human caution. The guard feels a kinship with these machines. He too is a redundancy. He is the one who watches when the cameras fail, the one who listens when the sensors are silent. He is the final fail-safe in a system designed for eternity. He takes a deep, slow breath, the cold air filling his lungs with a heavy, satisfying pressure. He is ready for the next hour. He is ready for the next century. The mountain is steady. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. As the final minutes of his watch tick away, he turns his gaze back toward the vault entrance. The amber light of the lamp above the door is a tiny, flickering spark, a lone candle in a cathedral of ice. In the vintage drawing of this scene, the artist would use a soft, orange pastel to smudge the light across the concrete, creating a sense of warmth that is more imagined than real. The guard looks at the heavy steel door, its surface encrusted with a fine layer of rime frost. He knows exactly what is on the other side: the long, sloping tunnel, the airlocks, the 3-ply foil envelopes, the plastic crates. He knows the geography of the silence. He is the curator of the quiet, the witness to the long, frozen sleep of the Earth's heritage. He feels a sense of profound, heavy satisfaction. He has fulfilled his duty. He has stood his watch in the heart of the polar dark. He thinks about the history of the International Seed Treaty's Article 12, a boring and vital piece of legal prose that governs the access to the seeds. It is a story of benefit sharing and genetic resources, a narrative of cooperation that is as slow and steady as the mountain itself. The guard finds beauty in the dry language of the law. It is the framework that allows him to stand here in the dark, a man from one nation guarding the seeds of every other nation. It is a triumph of the mundane over the spectacular, a victory for the people who believe in the power of an agreement. He looks at his watch, the analog hands moving with a tiny, rhythmic jerk. It is time. His shift is over, yet he does not move immediately. He allows himself one final minute of stillness, one final moment to become part of the permafrost. The sky above is a deep, resonant violet, a color that seems to vibrate with the weight of the universe. There are no stars visible now, only the vast, heavy pressure of the atmosphere. The guard takes a final, slow breath, watching the plume of his breath drift away into the indigo shadows. He feels the cold in his bones, a slow and steady ache that is the mark of his service. He is the guard of the Svalbard Seed Vault. He is the protector of the Doomsday Room. He is a dark silhouette in a world of soft pencil shadows and ancient blue-gray silence. He turns toward the service road, his movements slow and deliberate, his boots making that same low, rhythmic groan in the frozen dust. Step, pause, breath, step. The rhythm is a loop, a continuous, seamless transit through the Arctic night. He looks back at the vault one last time. The concrete portal is a darker smudge against the charcoal of the mountain, a brutalist spike that defies the softness of the snow. The amber light is a tiny, flickering point of hope in a world of ice. He knows that when he returns tomorrow, the light will be the same. The wind will be the same. The mountain will be the same. The seeds will still be at minus 18 degrees, sleeping their dreamless sleep in the heart of the rock. He finds a deep, rhythmic comfort in this permanence. In a world that is always changing, the vault is a constant. It is a sanctuary of the boring, a monument to the essential. The guard begins the walk down the slope, his dark figure slowly merging with the indigo shadows of the valley. The history of the world continues to be written in the stone and the ice, but here, in the shadow of the vault, the pages are turning very, very slowly. The silence of the mountain is absolute. The cold is eternal. The guard is a part of the stillness, a layer of the rock, a crystalline structure of duty and endurance. He moves away into the dark, but the mountain remains. The vault remains. The seeds remain. Everything is exactly as it should be. The cycle is complete, yet it never truly ends. It is a continuous, seamless loop of cold atmosphere, a story of a man and a mountain and a room full of seeds, waiting for a spring that is still 1,000 years away. The light of his lantern finally flickers out, leaving him in the perfect, textured dark of the Arctic night. He doesn't need the light to find his way. He knows the mountain by the weight of the air and the sound of his own footsteps. He is a creature of the shadows, a sentinel of the silence. He walks toward the distant, amber glow of the town, a slow, dark shape moving through a world of soft pastel grays and deep, resonant blues. Behind him, the vault remains a silent, heavy presence, a fortress of life in a landscape of stone. The night continues its slow and silent rotation around the axis of the earth. The permafrost is deep. The seeds are safe. The guard is finished, but the watch goes on forever.